Hello and welcome to Foreign Dispatches on Channels Television. I'm Teniola Shobowale. On the programme this week, we focus on the US presidential election, which is less than 2 weeks away, as US President Donald Trump and his Democratic rival Joe Biden spar off in the second and final presidential debate. Plus, the United Nations says extreme weather events have increased dramatically in the past 20 years, with Asia the worst affected.
The US President Donald Trump and his Democratic challenger Joe Biden both came on stage for the final debate ahead of the November 3rd election. Rules for the debate in Nashville had changed, with each candidate allotted 2 minutes to respond to each question. And during that time, the debate staff would mute the microphone of the candidate who is not speaking. After the 4 minutes of the relative quiet, it may be a free-for-all once again. And the debate got off to a quick start with the coronavirus pandemic.
I say we're learning to live with it. We have no choice. We can't lock ourselves up in a basement like Joe does. He has the ability to lock himself up. I don't know. He's obviously made a lot of money someplace, but he has this thing about living in a basement. People can't do that. We have to recover. We can't close up our nation. We have to open our school. And we can't close up our nation, or you're not going to have a nation.
He says that we're learning to live with it. People are learning to die with it. You folks home will have an empty chair at the kitchen table this morning. That man or wife going to bed tonight and reaching over to try to touch their, out of habit, where their wife or husband was, is gone. Learning to live with it. Come on. We're dying with it.
It's not my fault that he came here. It's China's fault. And you know what? It's not Joe's fault that he came here either. It's China's fault.
When it hit, what happened? What did the president say? He said, don't worry, it's going to go away. Be gone by Easter. Don't worry, the warm weather. Don't worry, maybe inject bleach. He said he was kidding when he said that, but a lot of people thought it was serious.
President Trump has said that they should pay.
Trump repeated his accusation that Biden and his son, Hunter, engaged in unethical practices in China and Ukraine. No evidence has been verified to support the allegations, and Biden called them false and discredited.
Air Force Two, number one. Number two.
Trump's effort to uncover dirt on Hunter Biden's Ukraine business ties led to the president's impeachment.
There's a reason why he's bringing up all this malarkey. There's a reason for it. He doesn't want to talk about the substantive issues. It's not about his family and my family. It's about your family. And your family's hurting badly. If you're making less than, if you're a middle-class family, you're getting hurt badly right now. You're sitting at the kitchen table this morning deciding, well, we can't get new tires, they're bald because we have to wait another month or so. Or are we going to be able to pay the mortgage? Or who's going to tell her she can't go back to community college? They're the decisions you're making in the middle-class families like I grew up in Scranton and Claymont. They're in trouble. We should be talking about your families, but that's the last thing he wants to talk about.
I want to talk about North Korea. I do want to turn to 10 seconds, Mr. President. 10
seconds. That's a typical political statement. Let's get off this China thing, and then he looks, the family, around the table, everything. Just a typical politician when I see that.
Let's talk about North Korea.
I'm not a typical politician.
Okay,
that's why I got elected.
Let's
get off the subject of China. Let's talk sitting around the table.
All right.
Come on, Joe, you can do better.
Joe Biden attacked President Trump over his close relationship with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, a relationship Donald Trump defended.
Right at the beginning, had a great conversation. It was supposed to be 15 minutes, and it was well over an hour. He said the biggest problem we have with North Korea. He indicated we will be in a war with North Korea. Guess what? It would be a nuclear war, and he does have plenty of nuclear capability. In the meantime, I have a very good relationship with him. Different kind of a guy, but he probably thinks the same thing about me. We have a different kind of a relationship. We have a very good relationship, and there's no war. And, you know, about 2 months ago, he broke into a certain area. They said, oh, there's going to be trouble. I said, no, they're not, because he's not going to do that. And I was right. Look, instead of being in a war where millions of people, Seoul, you know, is 25 miles away, millions and millions, 32 million people in Seoul, Millions of people would be dead right now.
President
we
Trump,
don't have
that's
a war,
30
and
seconds.
I have a good
Thank
relationship.
you. Vice President Biden, to you. North Korea conducted 4 nuclear tests under the Obama administration. Why do you think you would be able to rein in this persistent threat?
Because I'd make it clear, which we were making clear to China, they had to be part of the deal. Because here's the I made it clear, and as a spokesperson of the administration when I went to China, that they said, why are you moving your missile defense up so close? Why are you moving more forces here? Why are you continuing to do military maneuvers with South Korea? I said, because North Korea is a problem, and we're going to continue to do it so we can control them. We're going to make sure we can control them and make sure they cannot hurt us. And so if you want to do something about it, step up and help. If not, it's going to continue. What has he done? He's legitimized North Korea. He's talked about his good buddy, who's a thug, and he talks about how we're better off. And they have much more capable missiles, able to reach U.S. territory much more easily than ever did before.
Meanwhile, President Trump had his microphone muted at some point before he finished his sentence, but praised NBC News correspondent Kristen Welker's moderation of the debate.
Because I'd make it clear.
Though Trump trails Biden significantly in national polls, the contest is much tighter in some battleground states where the election will likely be decided.
And in fact, if you remember the first 2 or 3 months...
Let's shift focus from elections to the environment. The United Nations says there's been a staggering rise in natural disasters over the past 20 years, and the climate crisis is to blame. Researchers point to a failure of political and business leaders to take meaningful action to mitigate the impact of climate change.
From floods, droughts, hurricanes and wildfires between 2000 and 2019, there were 7,348 major natural disasters that claimed 1.23 million lives, and that's almost double the 4,212 disasters recorded from 1980 to 1999. The United Nations report, The Human Cost of Disasters 2000 to 2019, shows Asia was the worst hit from climate disasters in the past 20 years, suffering from 3,068 disaster events between 2000 and 2019. That was followed by 1,756 disasters in the Americas and 1,192 in Africa. The worst affected country over the past 2 decades is China, which experienced more than 500 natural disasters, followed by the United States with 467 disaster events.
The Secretary General addressed via video message the 4th meeting of the Coalition of Finance Ministers for Climate Action. He said the pandemic is a dress rehearsal for the even greater climate emergency faced by all nations, and told ministers that their recovery plans will determine the course for the next 30 years. The Secretary General said the world needs finance ministers to align COVID recovery and stimulus plans with the goals of the Paris Agreement and to end fossil fuel subsidies, invest in green jobs, and not bail out polluting industries. There's been a dramatic rise in disasters over the last 20 years, explained by a rise in climate-related disasters, including extreme weather events. In the last 20 years, has seen the number of major floods more than double. The report also records major increases in storms, drought, wildfires, and extreme temperature events. Over the last 20 years, major recorded disaster events claim 1.23 million lives, impacting 4.2 billion people, many on more than one occasion, resulting in approximately almost $3 trillion in global economic losses.
Meanwhile, the report says coronavirus pandemic, which has killed more than 1 million people and infected at least 37 million, has exposed the failure of almost all nations.
COVID-19 is but the latest proof that political and business leaders are yet to tune into the world around them. And right now, disaster management agencies, civil protection departments, fire brigades, public health authorities, Red Cross and Red Crescent, and many, many NGOs are fighting an uphill battle against an ever-rising tide of extreme weather events. More people are being affected by the expanding climate emergency. Now, furthermore, disaster risk is becoming systemic. This is what COVID-19 showed us. A public health crisis quickly morphed into a socio-economic global crisis. I think that COVID-19 has really, really raised the awareness, not only amongst the governments, but also the public in general, about the risks that surround us and about the systemic nature of the risk, which this report also talks about. So one risk leads to another. And they can see that if COVID-19 is as terrible as it is right now, climate emergency can be even worse. This can be a warm-up event.
The UN calls on governments to invest in early warning systems and have disaster risk reduction strategies in place. Experts say currently the world is on course for a temperature increase of 3.2 degrees Celsius or more unless industrialized nations can drastically cut their greenhouse gas emissions. That projected temperature increase is enough to increase the frequency of extreme climate events across the world.
Meanwhile, scientists who spent more than a year studying climate change in the Arctic have returned to base with alarming findings. Scientists say the Arctic Ocean is warming and warn of ice-free summers there in just decades. The German ship Polarstern is docked at its home port after 389 days drifting through the Arctic.
The German research vessel Polarstern spent a year in the polar north, much of it with its engines turned off so it could simply drift in the sea ice. The point was to study the Arctic climate and how it is changing. An expedition leader, Professor Markus Rex, returned with a warning. The sea ice is dying.
Diese Welt ist bedroht. Wir haben wirklich gesehen, wie das Eis.
This world is threatened. We really saw how the ice is disappearing. North of Greenland, we found broad expanses of open water, in an area where there should normally be thick ice, parts of its multi-year ice. And even at the pole, the ice is completely melted and full of holes. It was very evident. You could see it all around. You didn't need measuring instruments. The ice is dying. If we keep going as we are, then the Arctic will be ice-free in summer within a few decades, and the world I just described will no longer exist.
Spearheaded by the Alfred Wegener Institute in Germany, in total 442 researchers, crew members, teachers and journalists hailing from 37 countries were involved in the 5 stages of the expedition. Over the course of a year, they examined changes in the atmosphere, ice and ocean, and the impact on the Arctic.
Die Grenzen des Machbaren in der Arktisforschung.
Over the last year, we have pushed the boundaries of the possible in the Arctic. We have broken several Arctic research records, and we have redefined the landscape for future research. We have achieved something great. I think we can really say that the expedition was a historic milestone of polar research, and will be seen as such for a long time to come. And we have returned with a trove of data and samples which will change climate research forever.
The mission wasn't without its challenges.
Constant cracks in the ice, the appearance of giant ice mountains, hummocks, which arise when there is a lot of pressure in the ice, violently rumbling and squeaking, and suddenly you have a mass of ice several meters high in front of you, where a few minutes before there was only flat ice. These ice mountains threaten our infrastructure and our instruments. We constantly have to relocate things so that we don't lose anything. And it's the same with the cracks in the ice. On top of that, there is the impenetrable blackness of the polar night, working for months in complete darkness, which has polar bears running around in it. Very cute animals, but unfortunately somewhat dangerous for us.
Apart from the extreme cold and weather conditions, the coronavirus pandemic brought unexpected logistical challenges this spring. Despite the trouble, the mission was able to continue as planned. Scientists hope the data will help researchers better understand the ways the Arctic is changing and the reasons it's shifting so rapidly.
The COVID-19 outbreak plunged the world into uncharted waters. Scientists around the world are racing to find answers to many questions relating to the virus. One of the latest studies is from a group of Australian researchers who say the virus that causes COVID-19 can survive on banknotes, glass and stainless steel for up to 28 days.
Researchers in Australia's National Science Agency tested how long the coronavirus survived on both paper and polymer banknotes at various temperatures. They found that the coronavirus can survive to at least 28 days on both types of banknotes, which is significantly longer than the seasonal flu virus demonstrated survival up to 17 days.
So the virus is suspended into an artificial matrix that resembles human secretions. We then placed a droplet of that virus onto the surface, allowed it to dry, and then incubated it for up to 28 days at 20 degrees, 30 degrees, and 40 degrees. And then we sampled at regular points to see if we can recover any live virus.
The study also found that the novel coronavirus could survive at room temperature for weeks on a variety of other surfaces, such as glass found on mobile phone screens. However, experts say the experiments were carried out in virus-friendly conditions in a dark room with stable temperatures and humidity, so the virus may not do so well in the real world.
So in our study, it's in very controlled conditions, so a set temperature and set humidities for the entire experiment. In the real world, those surfaces are likely to be in contact with the sunlight. There'll also be different humidities, different temperatures. So the real world results would likely be shorter than what we were able to show.
Even so, they say these results highlight the need to wash hands as well as touch screens regularly and to avoid touching one's face in order to minimize the risk of infection.
I think probably one important factor is that one important note was that when we increased temperature, the survival of the virus was certainly shortened. So up to 40 degrees, the virus survived generally less than 24 hours. So heading into summer, that's certainly going to be an important factor, that the virus won't last as long in the warmer temperatures, but still maintain washing hands and sanitizing often.
The study published in Virology Journal involved drying virus in an artificial mucus on a range of surfaces at concentrations similar to samples from COVID-19 patients and then recovering the virus over a month.
Many around the world are pinning their hopes for a return to normal life on the swift development of a coronavirus vaccine. There are currently about 40 vaccines in different stages of human trials around the world, or no certainty as to when any will be approved for general use.
Scientific research is progressing rapidly. There are about 240 potential vaccines in early development worldwide, with 40 in clinical trials and 9 in the final stage of testing on thousands of people. Vaccines normally require years of testing and additional time to produce at scale, but scientists are hoping to develop a coronavirus vaccines within 12 to 18 months. One frontrunner is being developed by the University of Oxford and British-Swedish company AstraZeneca. Scientists say the vaccine triggers a strong immune response in the body. But on September 6th, AstraZeneca halted global phase 3 trials of the vaccine to investigate after one volunteer fell ill. After an investigation by independent regulators and British and Brazilian trials resumed on September 12, but as of now, trials in other countries remain on hold. Results from an early safety study of American biotech company Moderna's vaccine candidate in older adults showed that it produced virus-neutralizing antibodies at levels similar to those seen in younger adults, with side effects roughly on par with high-dose flu shots. Moderna is already testing the higher dose in a large phase 3 trial, the final stage before seeking emergency authorization or approval. Moderna says it is on track to deliver at least 500 million doses per year beginning in 2021. Pfizer and BioNTech are also developing an mRNA vaccine. Pfizer has signed a nearly $2 billion contract with the U.S. government to provide 100 million doses by December 2020, an agreement that goes into effect when and if the drug, which is currently in phase 3 trials, is approved and delivered. China has been one of the biggest players in the global race to develop a coronavirus vaccine. It currently has 11 vaccines in clinical trials and 4 in phase 3 trials around the world. And Russia's Gamaleya Research Institute has developed a viral vector vaccine that uses a weakened version of the common cold-causing adenovirus to introduce the SARS-CoV-2 spike protein to the body. Russia has not published any data from its clinical trials, but officials with the institute state that they have completed phases 1 and 2 and are now on phase 3 trials. The World Health Organization, however, lists the vaccine as being in phase 1 of clinical trials. Although scientists around the world are racing to find the vaccine, the WHO does not think there will be a widespread vaccination until the middle of 2021 and has warned that the death toll could hit 2 million before one becomes widely available.
Some good news now. Let's head over to Myanmar to meet the 100-year-old great-grandmother who has made a full recovery from COVID-19. Not only did she beat the virus, she says she barely knew she had it.
Since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, over 1 million people worldwide have died from the virus, with elderly people particularly at risk. But the disease was still no match for centenarian Tin Kin and her family, who are now safe and back at their home after recovering from COVID-19. Tin Kin tested positive in early September following infections of 9 other family members, including her grandchildren, after her grandson caught the virus from his goldsmith job. Spending 2 weeks in a Yangon quarantine center under isolated care and accommodated separately from the rest of her family members, the centenarian describes her entire condition as asymptomatic.
I was told that I was infected with that virus, but I said I felt nothing. I was eating well, showering myself, and walking as normal.
She says that the virus was a pale comparison to other more life-threatening experiences she has had, including World War II.
The situation during World War II was so much worse. Death is no matter for me because I'm very old. I've escaped from many deadly, worse and dangerous situations. In my life, I've been rescued from bombs and starvation. That's why nothing is significant for me. But I am really worried for the children in the next generation. Now, I'm just really worried for my children and grandchildren.
While the family has been granted the green light to go home by doctors after 2 negative swab tests for the virus, Tin Kin's granddaughter expresses a more cautious view, fearing reinfection.
Even though all the family got back home safe, we're still so scared of getting infected again. That's why we don't go anywhere outside. Even when we go to the market, we still buy food enough for days just to be safe.
Myanmar has recorded over 29,314 positive cases of coronavirus, including 664 deaths to date. Authorities say infection numbers are seeing an increase due to rapid test kits, but they also caution that the situation is not yet under control.
And on that note, this is where we end the program this week. As always, remember that you can catch up with all our top stories on channelstv.com. I'm Teniola Shobowale. I'll see you next time.